This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Good morning. Welcome to the Steve Gruber Show. 6 minutes after the top of the hour, I'm Duran Martinez in for Steve today. Rivalry weekend in Michigan. Michigan State has been the talk around the water cooler for many in the state. And, of course, the division has come. And the time to decide is now. You can go to the Steve Gruber Show page on Facebook, like the page, give your predictions, and make sure you give the score. Closest score will be a guest. The person with the closest score, rather. It's early. Will be a guest on the Steve Gruber Show. I love that. I love that incentive. Steve will be monitoring, and he will give his prediction tomorrow on Saturday before the game. So, be looking for that. Go to Facebook.com, look for the Steve Gruber Show, and you can weigh in on your thoughts. I'm picking Michigan on this. I've gone on record as to pick Michigan 19-17 over Michigan State. And I know I sit in the flagship seat of Michigan State at this particular station here in Lansing. But, again, I have grown up in Lansing. I have been a U of M fan my whole life. So it's just kind of how it worked for me. My dad's a State fan. Whole nother story. Getting to the news this morning, the Justice Department is broadening its overseas efforts against cybercrime. For the first time, the department has stationed a legal advisor in Malaysia to help ensure that countries in Southeast Asia have laws on the books to fight hackers and have the tools to investigate and prosecute cybercrimes. The new position is intended to shore up international partnerships against a kind of crime that's without geographic borders and is often carried out by overseas hackers who elude American prosecution. The new post is funded by the State Department. It lasts for a year, though Justice Department officials hope to expand the initiative to other parts of the world if it proves successful. Assistant Attorney General Leslie Caldwell is expected to discuss the move in a speech on Friday. European Union leaders are offering Turkey aid, easier access to EU visas, and sped up membership talks in hopes of stemming an unprecedented flow of refugees. Now comes the hard part, persuading Turkey to sign on and raising billions to make it work. EU leaders meeting for a summit in Brussels late Thursday agreed to give political support for an action plan for Turkey to help manage its own refugee emergency, but details proved elusive, and discussions in Ankara will continue in coming days. Diplomats said the package would involve as much as 3 billion euros in aid, but money for the migrant crisis has been slow in coming. EU President Donald Tusk said an agreement with Turkey makes sense only if it effectively contains the flow of refugees. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned leaders of Central Asian nations of a possible militant incursion from Afghanistan. Speaking at a summit of the heads of former Soviet republics, Putin said today that the situation in Afghanistan is close to critical and called on his counterparts to be prepared to act together to repel a possible attack. Putin has also praised his own military for airstrikes on the Islamic State group in Syria, saying that they destroyed dozens of command centers and killed hundreds of militants. Of course they have. Putin's statement comes a day after U.S. President Barack Obama announced plans to keep about 9,800 U.S. troops in place in Afghanistan through most of next year to continue counterterrorism missions and advise Afghans battling a resurgent Taliban. 11 minutes after the top of the hour. If you'd like to join the conversation today here on the Steve Gruber Show, by all means, give us a call. 888-900-9966. That's 888-900-9966. I would love to take your calls this morning. Also, we have some news coming out of the South Korea President, Barack Obama, and is welcoming the leader, South Korea, to the White House today in show of unity between close allies looking to deter nuclear-armed North Korea. Park Geun-hye is fourth Asian leader to visit the White House this year, a sign of the Obama administration's strategic emphasis on U.S. ties with the region of growing economic importance. Mudslides caused by rains and flash flooding have now shut down two roads north of Los Angeles. Authorities say it could be a while before State Route 58 in Kern County is reopened near Mojave, California. Earlier, a separate mudslide shut down Interstate 5 at Fort Tejon, and a number of secondary roads also have been left impassable from mud. Texas forestry officials are bringing in heavy bomber to fight a raging Central Texas wildfire that has consumed 6 square miles and has burned nearly 3 dozen homes about 50 miles east of Austin. The DC-10 air tanker can drop close to 12,000 gallons of fire retardant at a time over a swath 3/4 of a mile long and 500 feet wide. The aircraft coming from the West Coast is expected to be available on Friday. 2 bombs have exploded near a mosque in Nigeria filled with worshipers, killing at least 30 people. The Nigerian Emergency Management Agency says the attack happened last night in Maiduguri. An official says 20 people were wounded. Boko Haram Islamic extremists are suspected of being behind the attack. Police in Malaysia have arrested a man accused of computer hacking and allegedly providing information about U.S. service members to the Islamic State group. Police say the 20-year-old Kosovo citizen was in contact with senior Islamic State group leader and one neighbor says that he's sorry, I got sidetracked on my story. It's early. And he will face charges on this and could face life in prison if convicted. Officials in Windsor, Ontario, closed some streets near the Ambassador Bridge amid concerns about fallen debris from the international span linking the city with Detroit. Windsor says on its website that 2 streets were closed Wednesday after one was closed last Friday as a precaution. The city says the additional closures were recommended as a public safety measure after a visual inspection of the bridge's underside. Windsor says it plans to meet with bridge representatives to determine what needs to be done before streets will reopen. The Detroit International Bridge Company says in a statement that it is not aware of any incidents linked to the city's concerns. Bridge owner Manuel Matty Moroon wants to build a new span adjacent to the current one, but his efforts have been stymied. Good morning, Steve Gruber Show here with you. 14 minutes after the top of the hour, Duran Martinez muddling through this Friday. Join me, muddle along on the Michigan Talk Network.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense. Filling in for Steve Gruber, here's Duran Martinez.
You know, I just want to go, yeah, baby, yeah. Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. 19 minutes after the top of the hour, I am Duran Martinez. Alex Clark. Feeling a little randy with the music. Good to have you along. Lots of things going on. Lamar Odom, of course. If you're not tired of this yet, if you're not tired of woe is Lamar Odom for doing allegedly doing drugs and wanting to stay 5 nights at a Nevada brothel to party with a couple of young ladies that get paid to entertain, and for allegedly overdosing on an herbal enhancement pill. I can't feel terribly sorry for the basketball star, the former world champion basketball star. But I do have to applaud Dennis Hoff, the owner of the Love Ranch and the famed Bunny Ranch, as seen on HBO. Kardashian family wanted Mr. Hoff to not take to television, not take to interviews, and essentially told the Kardashian publicist to go to hell. Hats off to Dennis. I always like that guy. Just don't know him personally. Just for the record, don't know him personally. Just like his attitude. But I digress. Michigan City will receive, Michigan City will receive $6 million in state funding to help switch its drinking water source after lead and other problems. Governor Rick Snyder approved nearly $9.4 million in aid for Flint on Thursday. The same day lawmakers finalized the legislation. It also includes money for water filters, inspections, and lab testing. Flint stopped getting its water from Detroit system last year in a cost-cutting move, but has had trouble with water from the Flint River. State corroborated findings of elevated lead levels in children and disclosed higher levels in 3 Flint schools. Residents have complained about the water's safety, smell, taste, and appearance. Returning to Detroit will cost $12 million through June. Flint will pay $2 million. The Charles Stewart Mott Foundation has pledged $4 million. Flint River water. In Lansing, we have the Grand. And, of course, much maligned to, I don't know, from what I've understood from scientists and everything else, fear not the color of the river. It's just the sediment. And the Grand is a great place to fish. By the way, just throwing that in there. But it's no Flint River. A new state framework for evaluating teachers and school administrators would take effect this academic year under legislation passed by the House. The bill would follow up a 2011 law that overhauled teacher tenure rules. The law deferred legislative decisions on establishing a statewide evaluation system. Annual teacher evaluations would be based in part on students' standardized test scores. The measure would require districts and charter schools, starting in 2018 to 2019 school year, to base 40% of a teacher's evaluation on assessment and student growth data. Legislation won overwhelmingly approval from the House on a 97-8 vote Thursday. The Senate, which approved a different version of the bill earlier this year, could sign off quickly. Michigan third graders couldn't advance to fourth grade if they lag behind on state reading tests unless they qualify for an exemption under literacy legislation approved Wednesday by the House. The controversial retention provision would take effect for the 2019-2020 school year and after. Kids would get extra reading help, but couldn't enroll in fourth grade unless their reading score is less than one grade level behind. They show proficiency through an alternative state assessment or demonstrate mastery through work samples. Some students could still move to fourth grade for good cause, learning disabilities. English is their second language, or they have been previously held back despite receiving intensive reading help. The House approved the bill 57-48, mostly along party lines. It goes to the Senate for its consideration. A missing Illinois hiker has been found. The hiker from Illinois has been found in a wooded area in Michigan's far western Upper Peninsula. A TV station in Wausau, Wisconsin reports from a Gogebic County Sheriff's Office news release that 71-year-old John Niesman was somewhat dehydrated after being located in the Waters Meet area. He was hospitalized for evaluation. Niesman of Homer Glen was last seen Saturday at the Bel Air Motel in Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin. A jogger discovered his white SUV Wednesday night in Gogebic County, just over the Wisconsin state line. Family members said Niesman, who's known as Wolverine Jack, goes on a hiking trip in Michigan's UP twice a year. 24 minutes after the top of the hour, I'm Duran Martinez in for Steve Gruber. Make sure to go to the Steve Gruber page on Facebook to weigh in your thoughts on the Michigan State game happening tomorrow in Ann Arbor. It will take place 3:30, and that will be game time. And we want to know, what do you see the score being? What is your prediction for the game? And give the score. Winner of the event will be a guest here on the Steve Gruber Show. I'm just hoping it's not me. I mean, I don't mind if my team wins. I don't think you need me as a guest anymore. Just a thought. 888-900-9966. Anything you want to talk about today, we'd be happy to do it. Free for all Friday here on the Steve Gruber Show. Very, very good to be in the seat for Steve. Back on Monday, he will be. And I'm just looking forward to hanging out with you guys today. Got a lot more coming your way here in a little bit. 888-900-9966. The number to join the conversation here. I'm Duran Martinez, your host of Wild Michigan here on the weekends. Right now, it's the Steve Gruber Show on the Michigan Talk Network.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty. Filling in for Steve Gruber, here's Duran Martinez.
Da, da, da. Da, da, da.
Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. I am Duran Martinez. Makes me want to drive a Volkswagen for some reason. 27 minutes away from the top of the hour. Very good to have you along on this Friday. Anything you want to cover today? 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. No one should be awake this early in the morning. Being joined by Ann Schieber here, the Senior Investigative Analyst for the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Good morning, and good early morning to you, Ann.
No, thank you. Good morning, Duran.
You sound chipper and ready to talk this morning. I like that.
It's an act.
It's an act. I know. It's I tell everybody, how can you sound so awake in the morning? It's an act. Believe me, I'm faking it. Officers retiring, and this story comes at a very interesting time, because a longtime friend of mine who is a local deputy here in Michigan retires today. His family already in Florida. And I would assume that he's probably going to take another position down there because he has young kids. He's my age. He's 48, 49-ish. And that seems to be a retiring age for a lot of law enforcement people. And rightfully so. I get it. It's a tough gig, but that's probably going to cause a little issue for their employers, the townships and counties and cities.
And taxpayers.
And taxpayers. Well, I was waiting for that, too.
Not the least of which. And, the reason we do these stories is not to pick on any one individual, but to demonstrate how pension costs are crushing our schools and our local government. Many government agencies and our schools have defined benefit plans. You rarely see these kinds of retirement plans in the private sector anymore. And they are extremely expensive, and they have not been funded properly over decades. And so what we have is a huge liability that the taxpayers are going to have to pay, because retirements are constitutionally protected in the state. And there's also concern for the people who are in these programs. Over time, if there's not enough money in a program to fund a retirement, it's possible that these cities could end up in bankruptcy, as we've seen in Detroit, and those pensions are now in the hands of a bankruptcy judge.
As you mentioned, probably no greater fan of law enforcement than I and many law-abiding citizens who see law enforcement for what they are. Hindsight, always 2020. How can this be avoided, and why was it not an issue probably 10, 20 years ago before these ladies and gentlemen decided to retire?
Well, because, they were given promises that were not kept. And so the way governments have to fund these is they're supposed to put money aside each and every year to take care of these liabilities in the future. Well, it's very easy not to use that money if other spending needs come up, so they don't fund them. And in the case of Ann Arbor, which is featured in this story, they've only put aside 83 cents for every dollar that they have to pay out in the future. That means they have a huge hole that they're going to have to make up. And so what ends up happening is that money, they'll make payments towards covering this hole, but it comes at the expense of other spending. So you have cities, for example, that can't take care of roads or parks, so they got to close City Hall down a day or two. The money has to come from somewhere, and it only gets worse over time. So Mackinac Center and other fiscal experts have recommended that programs close these systems and go to a defined contribution plan, a 401k system, where the individuals get that money up front and they can keep it. They can keep it and walk out the door after 2 years of service even and have that money there for them to manage and have forever.
Ann Schieber's our guest here. Law enforcement, Ann Arbor, and you would think, too, when you have such a big system, that, knowing you have that dollar to put only 83 cents away, I guess the common sense is lost on me. But then again, I'm not running a big city either. I don't face the fiscal responsibilities of a place like Ann Arbor.
We have some cities that have closed these pension programs. But, for example, our schools, we still use a defined benefit system. In the school system, the Michigan Public Employees Retirement System, it's only 60 cents funded for every dollar. So we're facing a $26 billion liability there. And, years ago, back in the 90s, the state shut down the retirement system for state employees, but it's still open for school employees, and taxpayers are on the hook for this. And, what ends up happening is over time, the younger teachers are the ones who may end up be paying the price for this. They're going to be contributing to a system or being worked towards a system. And in 30 years, they may have to make drastic changes to that program where those pension promises may not be able to be kept. They might say, okay, you're going to have to work another 10 years to retire or so forth. So they're just not a fiscally responsible program for local governments or even state governments for that matter.
Sure. Speaking with Ann Schieber here on the Steve Gruber Show. And, it's funny when a lot of times you see people, remember when 65 was the golden retirement age? I'm looking at 49 going, wait a minute, I'm 48. I'll be 49 December. And it's almost unfathomable to me.
You're exactly right. And a lot of them stay in government service. So they end up going into perhaps another retirement program. In this particular story, we show how one individual is now working for another organization where he's in a defined contribution plan, but he's now working on a second retirement and collecting a retirement pet. And we don't even get into retirement health costs, which a lot of cities have promised their employees when they retire. So not only, a lot of people in the private sector don't retire until their 60s because they don't have health care. Well, that's not the case in a lot of government jobs where not only do they collect early pensions, but they get full-wide health care in their 40s, in their 50s, and that is another big liability that these cities face.
A difficult task at hand, to be sure. And again, applauding the men and women in law enforcement. I have a lot of friends in the industry. And again, a good friend of mine retiring today, moving down to Florida, which more than likely he'll be working down there. Another friend of mine working for City of East Lansing, retired, goes to work as a sergeant of arms in the Capitol, and then leaves there to a different law enforcement position. So it's... I can see the trend, and I can see where the issue would lie. But again, this is why we bring you in to let us know these things and to maybe help Ann Arbor out a little bit as well.
Well, it's something that our legislature is going to have to grapple with. Certainly, city commissions and councils are really going to have to make some tough decisions. But these are not sustainable programs.
No, absolutely not. Well, Ann, we appreciate your time here on the Steve Gruber Show this morning. Thank you for updating us on that.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Good to have you on. Steve Gruber Show this morning, 19 minutes away from the top of the hour. I'm Duran Martinez. Clearly, picked the wrong line of work. Kind of like Lloyd Bridges, an airplane. It's like I picked the wrong day to be a disc jockey. Steve Gruber Show on the Michigan Talk Network.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense. Filling in for Steve Gruber, here is Duran Martinez.
Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. Everything status quo. A play on music there. Steve Bucci, director of the Douglas and Sarah Allison Center for Foreign and National Security Policy, joining us here on the Steve Gruber Show this morning. We look at the possibility of our safety on a national level and on a global level, and even I'm going to throw this in, even though this really has nothing to do with the topic, but still, first thing this morning, 10 minutes after 5 o'clock, a tall woman approaches my vehicle while I'm in the line at a local eatery, local fast food place, waving her hands, and then proceeds to tap on my window. Now, mind you, large cup of coffee, sandwich, both hands full, did not see her as a possible threat. Waved her off. She left. Therefore, any type of crisis averted. But you don't see these things coming. Cyber attacks, other attacks, you don't see these things coming either. We have military to defend us on a global level and even on a local level if necessary. So here's the question. Is the world becoming safer or more dangerous? Steve Bucci, you join us. Your thoughts. If it's becoming safer, which it's not. Come on, let's look at this. It's not becoming safer on a global level. Why are we reducing military spending?
Well, that's a really good question because we've been trying to push back against that at Heritage. I think it's a big mistake. If you look at the threats around the world, they are growing, both in number and frankly, intensity. You look at Russia, you look at China, you look at ISIS. Things are not safer. They're more dangerous. Iran, and now the confluence of Iran with Russia. The Cubans are showing up in Syria to help them. There's even been talk of the Chinese sending some of their Navy to help them. This is very, very disturbing, and is so counter to everything this nation's been working on for the last 40 years. And at the same time, this administration turns around and says, well, the military's the same as Meals on Wheels. They need to compete, and if we can't raise domestic spending, we shouldn't raise defense spending, so let's just veto the whole bill. That's crazy.
And I look at this. I look at the news we got yesterday. You've got Iran, you've got Russia, you've got Cuba together fighting Syria. When do we not see that as a potential threat down the road? I look at those three together. I look at the World War II Axis powers of Italy, Japan, and Germany. Now, mind you, we're living in different times, and I find this more of a threat than I probably would have back then.
Yeah. And on top of it, we're at a time when our allies are, frankly, flat on their backsides as far as their defense spending and their economies. And you could see folks who are now reaching out to Russia and Iran to try and make accommodation because they're pretty sure America's not going to stand with them against these guys because, after all, we're making accommodations with them, so why shouldn't they? So you're seeing the Gulf Cooperation Council, all Sunni Arab countries who are, frankly, the sworn enemies of Iran, reaching out to that coalition to try and cooperate with them. Iraq, the country we liberated, saying, well, you Americans are just not cutting it. We're going to have to deal with the Russians. Turkey, another Sunni country, reaching out to them, trying to make accommodation, and the Europeans are starting to do it. It's a really scary world.
It is, absolutely. So, and, now we have cut spending by more than $180 billion over the last 4 years. No real relief in sight, no increase in spending whatsoever do we see. And we're getting nothing but pushback from this president and this administration.
Yeah, not just no pushback. It's they're sort of facilitating it and seem to be comfortable with it, even though the president gives lip service and says, those Republicans are cutting the defense budget because they won't fix the problem the way I want them to fix the problem, which is to raise the budget for everybody. The Republicans came up with a way, not a perfect way, I admit, using the Overseas Contingency Operation Fund as a way to give extra money to defense to deal with very real problems of repair and modernization and training. They are, the president saying, unless you raise the budget for all my domestic entitlement programs, I'm not going to let you help fix defense. And he's sitting there going, see, it's really their fault. It's a ridiculous argument, but the press and the Democrats in Congress seem to be content to let them do it.
Steve, about a minute left in this segment here on the show. With the exception of a new president, what is it going to take to get a little bit more spending going on for our military? I mean, we just now committed our troops to stay, despite what was said earlier, through 2016.
Well, I mean, people need to call the president on this baloney path he's on of vetoing the National Defense Authorization Act. There's only been a couple of those in the past. They have all been based on very specific, like one provision that was a policy problem, like one was going to cut all of our nuclear programs, and the president vetoed it till they put it back in. But what President Obama is doing is just playing budget games to try and get money for domestic entitlement spending, which is the area that got us into the economic problems we have now. So your listeners need to call in, tell Congress to fix it.
All right, Steve Bucci, appreciate your time here on the Steve Gruber Show. No instant fix for this, but you know what? You're still Americans. You still have a voice. Make them be heard. Steve Gruber Show on the Michigan Talk Network.